Zero trust. Is this just marketing? Is it a real thing? Is it a strategy perhaps? Well, we're going to find out today. And my name is Lieuwe Jan and here from the RSA Conference in the middle of San Francisco, we present to you Threat Talks on Tour. And the subject of today is Zero Trust.
Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity.
Let me introduce my guest. It's the one and only John Kindervag. John, welcome. He's the creator of Zero Trust.
Hey.
So great to have you here. John, how many selfies did you have to take this week?
Way too many, and I'm still not used to it. It's a really weird thing, you know? I tell people if I was this popular in high school, I could have gotten a date.
Well, I'm sure you got your dates as well.
And, well, the important one, I've been married 38 years this year, so.
Great, congratulations. Well,
and you know my wife too, so.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So, Zero Trust. I mean, we go back a long time. I mean, before, like you said, now you are popular and taking selfies, but that wasn't always the case.
No, it wasn't.
And we're doing two podcasts in a row actually about this subject. And in this subject, what we're going to do is talk a little bit about the history and how you came to this idea of Zero Trust and a bit on the terminology. So, you were at Forrester
right.
a long time ago. I mean, Zero Trust is still a thing. I mean, it's already like over a decade old. Huh? Can you explain to us a little bit how did you come up with all the ideas on Zero Trust, because they were revolutionary at the time?
You know, you and I have known each other a long time, and like you, I used to install old school firewalls. And if you remember, the firewalls had a trust model, right? Where the internal network had the highest trust level of 100, and the external network had a low trust level of 0, and then all the other interfaces had a different trust level, 1 to 99. And just by designating a trust level, that determined the policy. So from a high trust level to a low trust level, the algorithm said you didn't need to have a policy. So you didn't need to have any outbound policies. And when I was installing those firewalls, I thought that was insane, right? What if somebody gets, purchase on your network and wants to exfiltrate data? There's no rule to stop that from happening. And I would try to put those in, and the firewall vendors and everybody would just have a fit that I was doing that. Well, but that's not how the trust model works. And I said, well, the trust model the hackers don't care about the trust model, right? They're like, oh, they may have invented it for all I know, right? When I got to Forrester, they said, what do you think needs to change? I said, this trust model is broken. All those interfaces need to have the same level of trust, and that's 0. That's how much trust there should be in digital systems.
Is this also why you went to Forrester? I mean, it sounds like you were installing firewalls everywhere, and part of you was aching a little bit and always in pain because you had to do it in this, stupid way, if I may say so.
Yeah, I mean, it was prescriptive from a vendor who probably didn't know anything about cybersecurity. If you look at a lot of vendors, they build security technologies, but they haven't done cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. Or information security back when I was there, because back when I started it was called information security. Now it's cybersecurity. What's a cyber? Why should we protect it? Right? So language matters. Mm-hmm. This is why Zero Trust matters, because trust is a human emotion, right? It's been injected into digital systems for absolutely no reason. But people will say to me, John, you're saying people aren't trustworthy, and I'm not saying that. I'm saying something much more profound. I'm saying people are not packets. No person has ever been on a network. You and I have been on many Zoom calls together, but neither one of us have ever shrunken down into a subatomic particle so we could be sent over the public internet to the Zoom server.
I would love that experience.
I'll bet you would. Knowing you, that you would. But, that only happens in Tron, Lawnmower Man. Remember, even in the Matrix, they got to plug in, right?
Yeah, true, yeah.
So people are not packets, and it's the anthropomorphization of the network, the idea that John is on the network, that is the problem.
Yeah. So Zero Trust has nothing to do with trusting people or distrusting them, or insider threats is obviously a part of it, but that's not why you came up with that. How did you come up with the name?
Just the interfaces. 100, 0, and then, you'd have 49 and 51 for the first 2 DMZs and all that stuff. It was insane. And I said, let's just make them all 0 and write explicit policies about whether to allow traffic or not. And I would always start with a default deny. Any deny was the first rule I put in a firewall.
Yeah.
Right? Which was
very common these days.
Very common these days, but back then, no, we don't want to do that. Because all anybody cared about was packets flowing. No one cared about security. And I would argue today that no one cares about security. Right? You've heard of the CIA triangle, of course, right? Right? It's supposed to be equilateral. Well, it's actually an isosceles triangle where the hypotenuse is availability. And then the C stands for compromise. We have a lot of highly available yet compromised networks, right? Because we see that by the amount of dwell time that's in there. No one cares if the attackers are hiding in the basement, like in the movie Parasite. All they care about is the network up and running, right? Are packets flowing? It's crazy.
Yeah, I have to say, indeed, whenever we onboard a customer, often the IPS profiles aren't there. It's all IDS profiles. It's a similar thing, right? It's all availability over. But then, it's suddenly when there is a security issue, then the availability thing comes into play. It's you just delay the lack of availability, and that's what people got to understand better.
And we're seeing that with ransomware attacks, right? Which both are data breaches and availability attacks. And so, but they all could be stopped, right? They could all be stopped using zero trust. Because remember, all bad things happen inside of an allow rule. If a bad thing happens inside of your environment, you had a rule that allowed it to happen. You're not a random victim of cybercrime. You're an unwitting participant because you have policy that is way too open. And that's what we need to remember.
Yeah, and a lot of implicit policy that makes it open. And like you said, with the trust levels, if you go from one level to the other, if you go up, then there's no rule. So it's not explicitly said, hey, let's allow everything to everything.
Right.
But the technology traditionally has been built in such a way that the default configuration is that's a big allow rule. And if you would ask the CISO of Target, for example, hey, before the breach, hey, shall we make a rule to allow traffic to the database server from this planning server for, I think it was maintenance of their air conditioning.
Right.
He would have fired you, right? If you would have proposed that. But it was there. I mean, the denial wasn't
Well,
there.
and we go back to that, you're talking about the Target data breach, and just last month, the NSA released some network segmentation guidance for zero trust, and their opening statement is about the Target breach, pointing out that if proper segmentation, and they're talking about segmentation for zero trust. If this would have been done, that breach would have never been happened. It wasn't the HVAC contractor's fault. It was the fault of Target, who put the HVAC contractor's management system on the cardholder data environment, which is an explicit failure or explicitly called out to not do that in the PCI DSS. Because I'm a former QSA. We say we're in recovery because PCI is a 12-step program. So you're always in recovery, even though you leave.
Yeah, that's funny. So you mentioned segmentation. I mean, I remember one of the in the early days where we met, and you were at Forrester. I asked you about the segmentation gateway. I mean, your network architecture that you proposed there in Forrester, you defined this machine that could be in the middle of things. So it would be the control point really close to the data, close to, well, we didn't call it protect service back then, but close to the protect service. Yeah. And I remember asking you, yeah, that's nice, but it doesn't exist. And your answer was something like, that's not my problem. I'm here to explain. How does this work? And we now the segmentation gateway now has a name, eh?
Right.
That's the only thing you were slightly off the name. It's not a segmentation gateway. It's the next generation firewall.
Right.
So it happened. So tell me a little bit about how these things work.
Well, I mean, when you're at Forrester, at least when I was there, your job, my job description was think big thoughts. 3 words. Mm-hmm. And we were supposed to be ahead of the curve and provide thought leadership, real thought leadership. So zero trust. I also wrote about virtual SOCs long before anybody else did, right? I had a report called Rules of Engagement about how you deal with policy and agree with an end user about what you're going to do long before you make a decision, which you have put into your technology, and other people have put into their technologies. So there's a lot of things that I can see in the industry where, oh, I wrote this 5 years before it happened or 10 years before it happened, but that was my job, right? And it was a great job to have because you weren't bounded by what was possible, you were bounded by what needed to be done. And so we did, I did 2 years of primary research on Zero Trust before I wrote the first report. I tested all of the issues, I built prototype networks, I made sure it worked, and so when it came out, even though people were making fun of me to my face,
I remember that.
right, I didn't care because I knew it worked, right? I knew it was, and there were people, very important people at very important places that were really into it that encouraged me, that led me to believe that it was absolutely going to work.
Yeah, because it takes such an idea that is controversial in many ways. I mean, I remember that customers said, that's not going to work. The firewall has only a 2 gigabytes per second throughput capability, and my backbone is 73.
Right.
So if you're telling me to put a firewall in the heart of my network, that's dead on arrival. That's what I thought. We're now doing it, of course, and it takes a while. So let's talk a little bit about all the crucial milestones in the adoption of Zero Trust then. I mean, I remember, of course, the executive order that came out, that was a big thing, right? Big deal.
But let's go back, okay? We're gonna go back in history a little bit to say what leads up to the executive order. Because probably the biggest thing that happened was the OPM data breach, Office of Personnel Management, which is where essentially the knock list that Ethan Hunt was trying to steal in Mission Impossible 1 was stolen, right? He was
many science fiction movies happen later on.
Yeah, he was hanging upside down in that highly secure room from that funky trapeze. That room didn't exist, right? All he needed was some basic SQL injection hacking skills, and he could have stolen what became the knock list. So after that happened, the US Congress did an investigation, and in the report that they issued, they said the OMB, Office of Management and Budget, who provides guidance around security, should provide guidance to all federal government agencies to move towards adopting Zero Trust.
Yeah, the word Zero Trust was in that report.
It was
I remember.
in that report.
Yeah, how did it get in there? Do you know?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell me? Can you tell us?
I do know how it got in that report.
Okay. But you can tell us about it. Ah, okay, yeah, I got you.
But
but you do know how the executive order came into the world. Yeah.
And again, I mean, Zero Trust was very big in governmental places. I've been all over the world, met with lots and lots of governments. They understand it. Zero Trust was designed to resonate to the highest levels of any organization, the grand strategic leaders, and it was. But it can be implemented using commercially available off-the-shelf technology at whatever level that technology is at any time. I knew the technology was going to get better and better, so I decoupled it purposely from the strategy. So the strategy doesn't change, but the tactics, the technology gets better and better.
Yeah.
And one of my mentors taught me that most people confuse strategy and tactics, and I learned how to separate them. So it was the strategic leaders and the strategic thinkers who were the first adopters of Zero Trust. In fact, one high-ranking military official in a comment on LinkedIn said the biggest thing that John did with Zero Trust is he brought the concept of grand strategy into cybersecurity because it had never existed there before.
Yeah. So finally, you found a way to communicate a very technical thing, but that started as a really technical solution, right? And somehow you need to talk to the highest ranks, and this is what you found to be working.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for me, you have to find the right audience. That wasn't the traditional cybersecurity audience. Those people were always, that's not the way we've always done it. And I would say, wow, the way we've always done it is sure working. Why not give it a try, And eventually more and more people. And what would be funny is I would be doing a workshop, say, and there'd always be somebody who was just really hammering me. I mean, you can't insult me. You can't hurt my feelings because people have tried. But eventually then somebody else would come in and say something negative about zero trust, and that person, the light bulb would click and they go, no, you're misunderstanding it, and then they go to the whiteboard and draw something. And so a lot of the people who were the biggest skeptics became the biggest advocates after they understood what was really going on.
Yeah, it's like a switch that has to flip in your mind. Eh?
Yeah.
We always say, I mean, in my view, zero trust is for free, right? It's there, it's out there. It's a mind switch, and then you embrace it, and then you benefit for the rest of your life. So we should all do it.
Right. The epiphany that I see in people's eyes is what's really gratifying.
Yeah. I can imagine.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they have to go into their organizations. I mean, it's great to have a person in an organization get it, but then you get into other areas of the organization, and well, how do you get those on board?
Right.
And over the years, you've coined lots of terms, and like the Protect service. It's like you have a presentation where you compare a Protect service with the beast.
Right.
I mean, if you ask, who do you ask? If you want to protect something, it's the Secret Service, right? Those analogies, I think they are.
Yeah, people
really
love
great.
that analogy of how the U.S. Secret Service protects the President of the United States. It's a great visual demonstration of what we're doing in Zero Trust. So I'm always looking for a way to communicate very highly technical things in a way that can be easily consumed by non-technical people. Because the leaders of our organization are typically not technical, nor should they be. That's not a diss against them, because a lot of us who are technical aren't really business oriented, right? So we have to find a way to balance this out, but drive cybersecurity as a business enabler, and that's what Zero Trust does.
Yeah, it's one of the basic principles. Yeah, well, we talked about the executive order, and talking about what Zero Trust is. I mean, yeah, we've been on the floor, on the expo floor, and there's zero trust everywhere. And of course, it's become a little bit of a marketing thing as well. I mean, it's the hipster thing to do. It's you have zero trust and AI. That's basically the two things that drive the industry, it seems.
And that's fine, because all of those are force multipliers in getting us down the road. So we're all going down towards the same North Star. We might be in parallel. There might be some people off the trail a little bit, but eventually everybody will come back. So that's the gratifying thing.
I was personally very happy about the AMS-IX committee that created a report, and I know you did a big portion of that report, because that defines zero trust to the world, right? I mean, there's so much buzz going on, and what I've talked to a lot of people at our booth here as well this week, and yeah, they're confused now because zero trust, and I point them. We'll put in the show notes. We'll put a link to the AMS-IX report, because that kind of defines zero trust. Could you summarize that for a bit?
Yeah, it's
for some important
the President of the United States has a thing called the National Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee, and there's lots of subcommittees that run off of that. But this is all of a lot of leaders in telecommunications, security, all that kind of stuff. And I was appointed functionally by the President to serve on the subcommittee for Zero Trust and Trusted Identity Access.
The moment they could already find you, you became a little bit popular already, apparently.
Right, yeah. And so that, we spent about a year collaborating, all the thought leaders and experts in Zero Trust together, working on this. So I got to be a member of the committee. I briefed them, which is when you tell them your views, and one of the primary co-authors of the report. And that report then was delivered to President Biden on February 23rd, 2022. We were trying to get it delivered to him on February 22nd, so it'd be 2/22/22. But there was a mistake, and they had to pull it back, and so the final was not delivered until the 23rd. So we missed it by a day.
But you still remember the date, huh?
I do. And I mean, that was a big chunk of my life. And I was working for you at the time. So, by the way, he and I have been friends since 2013, probably.
2013 was the first time we actually met at an event at the Bright Cloudy Conference.
I worked for him until I took my new job at Illumio. So we've been friends for a long time. But and I'm glad to be doing this. But that AMS-IX report is authoritative on what Zero Trust is. If you want to argue with me about it, I'm just going to hand you this presidential report, because it's also the foundation of the work I do with the Cloud Security Alliance, which has a Zero Trust initiative, and that's global. One of the reasons I chose to work with the Cloud Security Alliance is because they don't have a bias towards any country. So I was just in Zurich with you doing a day-long masterclass on Zero Trust for the Cloud Security Alliance, right? So that collaborative effort, I did Cloud Security Alliance stuff in Japan, and this is a global movement, man.
Yeah, can you elaborate a little bit on that? I mean, it's indeed it's global. If you follow you on LinkedIn, or then from time to time you see someone from Japan taking a selfie with you, and then at this event in Zurich, it took a while before we could finally get a beer because everybody wanted to. Can you speak a little bit about how different parts of the world look at Zero Trust? Is there a difference? Is it all the same? Is it a universal language? Do you see more adoption somewhere? Is there something to say about it?
I mean, to be honest with you, I kind of think of the Netherlands as the epicenter of Zero Trust because of what you and Marcel and Onto It did, focusing on that early on. So we did the first ever Zero Trust event ever was in 2013. It was called Bright and Cloudy. It was in the Utrecht train station, right?
Yeah, in the railway museum.
Museum, yeah. And I remember my one-on-one meetings were in antique rail cars.
Yeah, they were.
It was very cool. And then we did 5 of those together, right? Yeah. Between when I was at Forrester, I went to Palo Alto Networks, but Palo Alto Networks sponsored me to come when I was at Forrester, sponsored me to come when I was at Palo Alto Networks. We need to start those up again, I think. But what you guys did was kind of create, that was the epicenter in my view as a country, because all the people that I would talk to in the Netherlands really understood it because you have this dike system, right? Where you're creating micro perimeters and protect surfaces to keep the country from being underwater.
Yeah, my home is 10 feet below sea level.
Right, yeah.
And people say I'm crazy. I don't know any better.
Right.
We have very good protect surfaces around my city.
And what's cool about it is you have a different set of governances around it.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
This is what people don't understand about the governance, and you can learn from the Netherlands because the government of the Netherlands doesn't control the dike system because everybody's worried that some government official will do something.
Cut funding.
Yeah, cut funding.
Yeah.
So that's cool. So
we also have a separate taxation, though. That's the downside of it, but we're happy to pay for it.
Well, either that or you'd be treading water all the time.
Yeah, true.
Right? Clint Bruce, our mutual friend, says Michael Phelps is the best person ever at not drowning. He's not the best swimmer ever. He's the best person at not drowning because the water always wins.
That is true. Yeah, the water always wins through. You have to constantly be against much like Zero Trust. You constantly be improving, be monitoring the situation. Yeah. How did you come up with the 5 steps?
So the 5 steps came out of, for a number of years, I was the only person doing Zero Trust in the world, and which was a great gift. A lot of people say, weren't you angry that people didn't adopt it sooner? No, because I got to make the mistakes so that you don't have to do them. I've already made the mistakes. I'm telling you, here's the mistakes that are going to make, and if you follow this 5-step model, there used to be 4 steps.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, there used to be 4 steps. Define your data, or we now call it define your protect surface, and then architect the network, and then create policy, and then monitor and maintain. There were 4 steps. And then during one big deployment for a PCI environment, somebody in the middle of the night, unrelated to the project, took out a server because it was old and brought down 3,000 restaurants globally. And then they all pointed to me, Zero Trust doesn't work. Like, no, what didn't work is nobody knew how the system worked together as a system. So I said, we need to map the transaction flows to understand how the system works. And so that became step 2. So that's how it went from 4 steps to 5 steps, because what I was looking is, what is common between all of these 20 or 30 deployments that I've done? And I realized ultimately that it was these 5 steps. Because luckily, that one where we brought everything down, that was like the 2nd or 3rd ever. So very quickly I said, we got to map the transaction flows. And you know who agrees with me? The National Security Agency. In that segmentation guidance came out, the number one thing you need to do is data flow mapping, right? Because if you don't know what you're protecting and how it works, there's no way you can protect it. So.
Yeah, this thing sounds scary to a lot of customers. Well, in our next episode of the Threat Talk, we'll talk about a little bit about, the things that may sound like hurdles, but in fact are not in the practice. If we go in there, So.
I got to say hi to Anna real quick. You're going to have to edit. Anna, come on in and say hi to Liuwe's audience. Hey, how are you?
Wear the boots.
Anna Delaney,
See?
everyone.
John has
Yeah.
so many friends now, and everybody
Susie,
recognizes him. And
ISMG,
she's going to take a
OG.
selfie, probably.
Yeah. Lieuwe Jan Koning.
Nice to meet you. I'm
You
Lieuwe.
can keep this in or edit it out. He's my old
We're growing
boss,
him.
and we rented the studio for a podcast. So
So you're part of the podcast now.
Soundtrack going on. In the
yeah,
background.
we do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's always busy at RSA.
yeah. So a little aside there.
No problem. Another thing I wanted to ask you, John. When we're going back to, we discussed about the segmentation gateway that you invented out of thin air. Well, there was a lot of science behind it. Let's pretend for a moment that you are with an organization like Forrester again, and you can dream about a new device or a new technology or a new application of existing technology. Is there anything on your mind that would, except for mind control? I mean, that would help.
Yeah.
Huh? That would help. Is it maybe it's probably a difficult question, but you must.
Well, I would expand on the rules of engagement model because of AI now. I think it makes it much more doable. So we ask, to find a threshold where we ask a client to say, hey, when can we stop this automatically without asking your permission? Is it essentially, right? In the military, there's a rules of engagement. When can you shoot? And so I wanted to adapt that. And with AI, I think we can do it more. But
Yeah, maybe to clarify for our viewers, this is, we can isolate hosts, we can put IPs on block lists, etc. You don't want to go through like a change control procedure all the time. We need to be quick, we need to be doing it right away. And that's how you came up with rules of engagement. Let's make some rules. Source are a way to implement those, of course. And you're saying let's expand on that.
I would expand on that because think about it, hackers don't have change control, right? And automation is really important. So what if you had to manually deploy an airbag the same way you manually make a change in your network? First, you have to submit a change control, an airbag going off a request, and then we have to have a meeting on whether or not we should do it, right? And then we have to pre-deploy the airbag release, and then, you'd end up dead, right? The thing about the airbag is that it goes off when it needs to, and occasionally there is a false positive in an airbag. But it's, how many of those have happened versus how many people have actually had their lives saved?
Yeah, you can play with thresholds. I mean, if you shut down all the machines at the same time because there's a configuration error, well, you can make a threshold into those, huh?
But what I would do, and what I am going to do at Illumio, I'm working on a new thought leadership piece that essentially is going to say that every organization needs to have an executive order that comes from the highest levels of that company that says we're going to do zero trust. Because ultimately, the outcomes you get are the result of the incentives you provide, right? So incentives lead to outcome. You get the behavior and you incentivize for it. So what I need is leaders to say we're going to do this. And I've had that done over the years. Many of the big successful zero trust environments that I was involved in came because some leader out of the blue ended up in a workshop and everybody's like, why is this person here? And they understood it and they told the people that you're going to do this, right? It wasn't a bottom-up approach, it was a top-down approach, and that's when it's most successful.
So it should be above the level of the CIO and the CISO that this is a thing. It should be like core.
CEO board level initiative that drives it down. I mean, and that's happened to me. I've been to a lot of board meetings. I have talked to board members and CEOs and presidents of companies, admirals and generals and military leaders and big leaders of civilian sides of governments. Those people have the opportunity to create change in their organization. They are the change drivers, right? You can't do it from the bottom up. Too many times, if we look at the Target data breach, which I know way more about than I really want to know, there were people there saying, let's unplug. And no, we'll lose all the money we're making from Black Friday weekend, our biggest weekend of the year. Well, the reality was the cost of that data breach was more than the money that they made during Black Friday, right? But no one was allowed to actually do the right thing. It cost them so much money that they had to leave the country of Canada They fired the CEO. I mean, it led to a lot of people losing their jobs, all because they allowed a data breach to happen. People knew it was happening, but they weren't allowed to stop it.
Great stuff. Yeah, we'll talk about drivers more in our next episode of Threat Talks. John, thank you very much for this episode on to entertain us on your thought process and how we are where we are here now. And I'm looking forward to next week.
Okay.
And where we're going to talk more about that. Viewers, thank you very much. If you like this story, please like this video, like this podcast. If you press the subscribe button, you will be sure to not miss our next episode, which, we dive more deeper even in Zero Trust than we already did today. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'd love your feedback. So if you have any feedback for us, please email us at team@threat-talks.com. And everybody who gets us great comments and good pointers, we'll get you a Threat Talk t-shirt as you're used to by now. Thank you very much and hope to see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by Onto It CyberSecurity and AMS-IX. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.